Dear students, hopefully all of you will be fine. I welcome you in the class of literary theory. This is our lecture number 1 in this subject. Now, first of all, we should go forward in order to look at the outlines of our lecture. We are going to discuss traditional method of studying and writing about literature. So this is a centuries old method, and we will try to look how traditionally we study and write about literature. Then we will also discuss some of the characteristics of traditional literary criticism. We will define what is literary theory. Then we will also have a view of trends in modern literary theory. And then I will try to give you the summary of the lecture, and finally there are some references. Now, if we look at the traditional method of studying and writing about literature, then what is our habit? We are in the habit of reading a poem to judge its literary and aesthetic value. So we always read a poem in order to judge what kind of literary qualities it has, or how much it is satisfying our aesthetic sense. So these are the main objects when we go through a poem. And what is our method? Our method is that we read the title of the poem, and then we read the name of the poet. And then we move forward, and after skimming and scanning certain information, we start recording the general impressions, and sometimes these general impressions are the themes of the poem. Now, when we get such kind of impressions by going through the poem, we always keep in mind the historical background of the poet's age and his or her biography. So this is generally our method, a traditional method. When we go through a poem, we try to focus upon its themes, first of all. Secondly, we try to enter into the poem through the poet. We also try to enter into the poem through the age. So the historical background and the age in which the poet was writing, these are very important issues for us when we try to read some poem traditionally. Now, what are the purposes, or what is the function when we go, or when we do such kind of reading? We try to fit that particular piece of poem into certain genre or art form. So right from the beginning, when we try to enter into the meanings of the poem, and when we try to access the meanings of the poem with the help of the writer and with the help of the age, then our second attempt is always to fit that poem into some kind of genre. For example, we try to fit it and we call it narrative kind of poem, an epic, for example, an elegy. So these are the genres in which we try to fit that poem that we are going through. Again, we try to judge its aesthetic and artistic values. What kind of artistic values, what kind of devices, for example, linguistic devices that a poem has been using, what are the figures of speech that the poem has been using. So these are our purposes. We try to look at the style of the poem and the style of the author majorly. So we do this practice of reading and writing about literature in general, keeping in view the traditional theories propounded by philosophers, literary figures and critics right from Plato to Albert. So these are our objects by and large, that we try to enter into the poem through the poet and through the age. So we always keep in mind the biography and the life history of the poem, and then we try to fit that poem in some kind of genre, that is the poetic genre, and we try to know the artistic and aesthetic value of the poem. So sometimes we also discuss the style of the author or the style of the poet when we go for such kind of traditional reading. And this practice is there right from the Greek philosopher Plato to the English philosopher Albert. Now, when we go through such kind of poems and we take such kind of traditional theories in order to analyze that particular poem, then the readers and practitioners, they through traditional theories, they get such kind of knowledge. Number one, the definitions of literature in general and definitions of particular genres of literature. So as soon as we fit some poem into some kind of genre, poetic genre, then we try to also know the definitions of different genres. Then what makes literature sublime? So these are the questions that we try to answer when we go through a poem by the traditional. Then poetic diction, what kind of diction, what kind of language the poem has been using. And we also focus upon the poetic process. So the relationship of literature with society, history and other discourses, etc. These are also discussed. So all these are the traditional method of going through poetry. Now if we count one by one the characteristics of the traditional literary criticism, then traditional literary criticism focuses on common sense view of world that lead to expressive realism, means what the author expresses is taken true and real to life. So this is a very important postulate, the idea that we attach with the traditional literary criticism, that it focuses upon the common sense of the people, and secondly it believes in expressive realism. So it is believed through this notion of expressive realism that what the author is saying, what the author is expressing is true and real to life. Secondly, it is led largely by the empiricist idealist notions of philosophy, generally based on liberal humanist consensus about language, literature, human identity and world at large. So empiricist idealist notions means anything that we gather through experiment is known as empiricist, and we know what idealism is. So then a liberal humanist, so we try to focus upon the humanism when we go through a poem traditionally, or we try to analyze some poem in it traditionally. Then notions of liberal humanism are highly significant in this regard. They are following. So what are the notions of liberal humanism? Number one, good literature is of timeless significance. So this is a kind of idealism about good literature, that it never dies. It is always there. It is always fresh. And secondly, individuality self is something securely possessed within each of us as our unique essence. So this is also the belief of such kind of liberal humanism, that individuality that is possessed by all of us, and it is a very unique kind of essence that we possess. This essence transcends its environmental influences and may be termed as transcendental subject. Then human nature ourself is essentially unchanged. So this was also one of the quality, we must say, of liberal humanism, that they believe that human nature never changes. The same emotions, passions, and even situations are seen again and again throughout human history. So history repeats itself, as we commonly say. So the human emotions and passions also repeat themselves in different situations. Then the purpose of literature is essentially the enhancement of life and propagation of human values. So this is also one of the idealism normally we attach with literature, that good literature always, it improves the quality of life and it also propagates the human values. Then form and content in literature must be focused in an organic way, so that one grows inevitably from the other. Form and content are very basic. For some poetry, it might be some fiction, or it might be some play. Form, how that particular poem or that particular drama has been formulated, what is its structure overall, and content, what is this is actually the themes, what it wants to portray. The purpose of literature is showing and demonstrating rather than telling, explaining, and saying of it. So this is also very basic point that we must keep in mind, that good literature always shows something. It does not tell, it does not explain, or it doesn't say something. And the job of criticism is to interpret the text, to mediate between it and the reader. So this is normally known as the job of criticism traditionally. Then traditional literary criticism is historical cum biographical in nature. What does it mean? It means that whenever we go and we try to analyze some piece of literature traditionally, then we always keep in mind the history of the age. Then we also, the traditional critics, believe that mostly the writers, whatever they experience in their life, it is expressed through their writings. So biographical element is always involved in such cases. Then when we interpret literature, we ignore the actual content of the text and focus on the biography of the author and historical background of the author's age. So we enter into the text with preconceived notions and values of author's age. So when we have so much belief in traditional ways of criticism, and when we believe that history plays its role in the formation of the latter, so naturally when we will go for analysis through traditional methods of criticism, then these factors, that is historical background, autobiographical background, or of any piece of writing, these play a very important role. It means that, as we have already discussed at the start, that we enter into some piece of literature traditionally through its author, through its age. It means that the text, the specific text that we are going through, it is of no importance. The reader is of no importance. The only importance is the author. So we try to analyze that particular piece of literature through the eyes of the author. Now, just I want to give you a brief kind of a definition of literary theory. So, Color in 1997 defines theory as it is something interdisciplinary, discourse with effects outside an original discipline. Then theory is analytical and speculative. So theory can be used for analysis, and it can the analysis that we get with the theoretical support, it is speculative as well. So theory is not something concrete. It is a large amount of philosophy is involved in such kind of theories. So it is always dynamic. It is not something static. It is an attempt to work out what is involved in what we call sex or language or writing or meaning of the subject. Then theory is a critique of common sense, of concepts taken as natural. Then theory is reflexive, thinking about thinking. So a lot of thinking is involved in the presentation of such theories. Then inquiry into the categories we use in making sense of things in literature and in other discursive practices. So these are some of the definitions that we have of literary theory. Now, this is all of our traditional way of looking at the things. If we could summarize what we have gone through, then it means that when we analyze some piece of literature traditionally, then we try to enter into that piece of literature through the poet, through the history, through biography. So these serve as the background of that piece of literature. Common sense is very important for traditional way of looking at the things. Similarly, as we have defined, liberal humanism is of great importance. And finally, we have also defined what is literary theory. So literary theory is something that is that has the quality that it different kind of disciplines are involved in it, and it is a kind of discourse with effects outside an original discipline. So the effects of such kind of poetic discourses, for example, fictionalized discourses, for example, these are very basic, and these are very significant characteristics of literary theory as well. Then theory should have the quality of being speculative and being analytical. Common sense, the theory that is the traditional theory, it gives us a critique of common sense. So it should have the qualities of reflexiveness, and then thinking, it is a kind of thinking about thinking. Then it has the feature of inquiry into the categories we use in making sense of things in literature and in other discursive practices. Dear students, hopefully you will have enjoyed as well as understood whatever we have gone through. We will start the modern way of looking at the things, the modern criticism, hopefully in our next lecture. So that's all from my side at present. Khuda Hafiz.